Hello, my name is Kyron Ross, and I will be reviewing distinguished psychologist Philip Zimbardo's TED Talk, The Psychology of Evil. Zimbardo got his MA and PhD from Yale University, both in psychology. He went through numerous teaching positions until he got to his final occupation as a faculty member at Stanford University. Zimbardo was elected president of the American Psychological Association in 2002 and today continues his work through his self-founded organization, the Heroic Imagination Project. He has released numerous psychology books used in college classrooms and has other exceptional books, for example, The Lucifer Effect. Philip's contributions to psychology are extensive, but of all of them, the famous Stanford prison study remains his most explored and discussed study. His other topics of study include persuasion, dissonance, shyness, heroism, and many more. Zimbardo begins his TED Talk by asking a question that he says philosophers, dramatists, and theologians have asked themselves for centuries. That question is, what makes people go wrong? Zimbardo asked himself this question when he was a kid growing up in the South Bronx, inner city ghetto of New York. He saw some of his close friends get in trouble, end up in jail, or unfortunately get killed. Later in life, he realized that the line between good and evil is permeable. Good people sometimes commit evil acts, and sometimes bad people can change their ways and be good. Zimbardo provides a psychological definition for evil. He defines evil as an exercising power to intentionally harm another individual psychologically, to intentionally hurt them physically, and commit crimes against humanity. The Abu Ghraib prisoner abuse scandal acted as a big influence for Zimbardo's future prison study. Zimbardo was part of the trials against the U.S. Army reservists that were accused of torturing and humiliating prisoners during the war in Iraq. He hypothesized that the American soldiers were actually good, but the system they were put in compelled them to exercise their power in an evil way. He acted as a witness for one of the accused guards and then got access to all of the reports given and thousands of photos taken. A slideshow of graphic photos from the prison are then displayed for the audience to see. In these photos, there are prisoners chained and covered in wounds, put in inappropriate positions, covered in feces, but the most shocking is that in most of these pictures, U.S. soldiers are seen smiling and posing next to the tortured prisoners who are visibly suffering. When he was asked, who are the bad apples, Philip explained that he should have been asking a broader question in terms of the Lucifer effect. Was it the bad apples, a few isolated people committing evil, a bad barrel, the system surrounding the people, or bad barrel makers, the politicians in the economic and legal system? Many people believe they are not evil, but Philip demonstrates that they could be compelled to commit evil depending on the situation. The popular Milgram experiment on obedience to authority was discussed to exemplify that good people could do evil. 1,000 individuals between the ages of 20 and 50 were asked to participate in a study that they were told would explore improving memory. The experiment had participants follow instructions given by a person in a lab coat. Sitting across from the participant was someone strapped into a chair that emits shock when a button is pressed. The participant's job was to be a teacher and get the person to learn the given material. If they were right, they get rewarded, but if they were wrong, a shock button would be pressed. The first button is 15 volts and goes all the way to 450 volts. When it reaches 375 volts, it says danger and severe shock. Go any higher and it reads 3 big X's. The results of the study showed that 2/3 of participants went all the way to 450 volts. Milgram conducted several more similar studies, and in most of them, about 90% of participants went all the way to 450 volts. Philip then talks about the external parallels to the Milgram study. In other words, what are some examples of this happening in the real world? In 1978, a pastor in the Guyana jungle convinced 912 American citizens to murder their family and friends and commit mass suicide. This demonstrates how dangerous blind obedience can be when compelled to commit evil acts. Philip Zimbardo describes his famous prison study as a study of the power of institutions to influence individual behavior. Out of 75 graduate volunteers, he picked 24 of the most normal and healthy graduate students to be randomly assigned to either be a prisoner or a guard. In other words, all good apples. The student prisoners in the study were humiliated and dehumanized, while the guards branded symbols of power and anonymity. The prisoners were forced to clean toilet bowls barehanded and other times simulate sodomy with the other student prisoners. Within 36 hours of starting the study, various students began having breakdowns from the stress. The study got too out of control and was shut down after just 6 days, resulting in 5 kids having emotional breakdowns. While studying warrior cultures, it was found that the warriors that go into battle with no disguise, as opposed to those who wear masks, paint, or a uniform, are more likely to kill, mutilate, and torture their victims. Anthropologist John Watson studied 23 different warrior cultures, and he found that if the warriors did not change their appearance, only 1 out of 8 of them tortured or mutilated their victims. But if they did change their appearance, 12 out of 13, more than 90%, torture and mutilate their victims. Zimbardo calls this anonymity one of the 7 slopes to committing evil when in a new or unfamiliar situation. The 7 slopes are 1. Mindlessly taking the first step, 2. Dehumanizing others, 3. De-individualized self, anonymity, 4. Diffusion of personal responsibility, 5. Blind obedience to authority, 6. Uncritical conformity to group norms, and 7. Passive tolerance of evil through indifference. So, how do we prevent this? Zimbardo suggests getting away from the medical model that focuses on the bad apples and shifting towards a public health model that puts situational and systematic factors into perspective. In other words, the barrel and the barrel makers. Zimbardo believes heroism is the antidote to evil, and by hero, he means someone who refuses to conform to evil. Instilling the concept of an everyday hero in children and in the education system will help kids stay away from evil and act heroically in everyday life. Joe Darby, a low-level private, was the one who turned in the abuse and torture photos and was forced into hiding for 3 years because of it. While Zimbardo's prison study was still going on, a woman told him that what he was doing to the boys was terrible and to realize that they are not prisoners nor guards, but that they are just boys, and he is the one responsible. Zimbardo came to his senses and ended the study. He then actually goes on to marry that same woman the following year. At the end of the TED Talk, Zimbardo discusses the 2 points that he believes to be the key to heroism. First, you have to act when other people are passive. And second, you have to act sociocentrically instead of egocentrically. He then closes by thanking the crowd and by asking them to advocate for respect of personal dignity, justice, and peace. Now that I have reviewed Philip Zimbardo's TED Talk on the psychology of evil, here are 3 questions to reflect on. Question 1. Why do you think people knowingly commit evil acts? Question 2. How would you define evil? Question 3. What are some ways to prevent an environment that encourages evil acts? For example, the Abu Ghraib prisoner torture and abuse. Thank you for taking the time to watch me review Philip Zimbardo's TED Talk titled The Psychology of Evil, and I hope you learned something new.